Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Today is January 21st. Welcome to another edition of TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon and I am super excited about today's episode. We have an outstanding lineup of interviews for you to partake in today. Lots of great stuff happening. We also today have the beginning of the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit. That's happening over at predict2021.com. An outstanding lineup there as well of a lot of industry luminaries talking about what is in store for the year in relation to cybersecurity, DevOps, cloud native, you name it, we cover it. So please, I encourage you at some point during the day to please check out Predict 2021. It's a 2-day event. It's happening today and tomorrow, and lots of good stuff. So please do check it out. But for today's TechStrong TV broadcast, we kick things off with an interview between Alan Schimmel and Martin Mao, who's the CEO of a company called Chronosphere.io. They are a cloud native monitoring solution, and they've been around for about a year. And in that time, the company has really taken off. They've got a product in general availability and a very large new round of financing. So yay for them. They are poised to really make some noise this year. So Alan and Martin talk about really what is behind the rapid rise of the company and what they have in store. So definitely an interview worth checking out. After that, Alan speaks with Aaron Newcomb from Sysdig. Sysdig recently released the results of its 2021 Container Security and Usage Report. That is always a fascinating read. So Aaron and Alan have a discussion about the report findings, what it means as far as container adoption is concerned and container security, which is becoming more and more of a hot button issue as time goes on and more containers are adopted in IT environments. Definitely worth checking out, especially if your organization is in the container space or utilizing containers in Kubernetes. I think there'll be some really valuable information in the report that your organization could really benefit from. After that conversation, we have a third part of the Haunted Hacker podcast. As I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it, I am so excited to have the Haunted Hacker podcast on TechStrong TV. Mike Jones is the host for the Haunted Hacker podcast. He's one of the founding members of the group Anonymous, a white hat hacker and pen tester and just hacker extraordinaire, but in a very good way. And he has some great conversations with a different roundup of guests for each of the podcasts. We are splitting up each of the podcasts into 3 sections and running it over the course of a week. So we ran part 1 on Monday and part 2 on Tuesday. And as I said before, today is part 3, which will wrap up this particular podcast, and then we'll have a new one next week. After that, in our Something Old section, we have from the recent DevOps Experience Virtual Summit, Corbin Pacheco, who is Senior Director of Product and Technical Marketing at D2IQ, has an unveiling of a poll that talks about the adoption of Kubernetes across the IT landscape. So this is a global study that the company kicked off, I believe it was late last week or last month, and Corbin actually discloses the results of the survey during the conversation. Talk about top challenges of Kubernetes adoption in 2020, and really what the results of the survey means for perhaps changes in the technology landscape. So a good conversation, definitely worth checking out. After the Something Old section, I come back and I give you the headlines, as I always do. And then I have an interesting conversation with Chanel Chambers from Tanium. She and I have a conversation about Adobe Flash. And now that Adobe Flash is no longer supported, there are definitely security considerations that organizations need to consider, not the least of which are potential reputational risk factors associated with companies that are not working to remove Flash instances after the end of 2020. It's an interesting conversation and definitely one worth considering if your company is maybe one of the few still using Adobe Flash and have not moved on to another platform. So really, really fascinating talk we had. Totally encourage you to listen. After that, I come back again and I give you the webinars preview for the coming week, and we've got some really good ones lined up. So definitely give that one a listen to. Then after I do my webinars preview, Mitchell Ashley comes on with his Analyst Corner segment, and he has a great conversation between Casey Zerkis, who's a content strategist with RSA Conference and a former contributor to Security Boulevard, and Katie Nichols, who was the Director of Intelligence at Red Canary. They join Mitch to share a preview of the RSAC 365 Virtual Summit that is happening next week. I think it is January 27th. Katie is going to be giving a talk on taking a more balanced approach to advanced persistent threats as part of a threat assessment and modeling strategy. Definitely a conversation you want to check out. And also, the RSAC 365 Virtual Summit, definitely something you want to check out as well. So great lineup of conversations in today's episode. I am very, very excited to get things kicked off, which we will do right after this commercial message. All right, welcome back. First up, we have a conversation between Alan Schimmel and Martin Mao, who's the CEO of Chronosphere.io. Chronosphere has been around for about a year. They have a product in general availability, and it's a cloud-native monitoring company. They discuss what's up with the company and why it's experiencing such a meteoric rise to the top. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode here on TechStrong TV. Our guest for this segment is Martin Mao. Martin is the CEO, co-founder of a company called Chronosphere. It's the website. It's chronosphere.io. And Martin reminded me when we were talking off camera, the last time I interviewed him was in person. It kind of gave me pangs in my heart to think about doing in-person interviews again. But it was in San Diego for KubeCon, and that had to be around, I'm going to guess, November of 2019. So a little over a year ago. My God, what a difference a year makes. Martin, welcome to TechStrong TV, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Alan. And it's like meet again after a year. It seems like a lifetime ago, I would say, for sure.
It is, man. And, as we were talking, I hope the day comes sooner than later that we can do in-person interviews again and travel to conferences and all of that stuff. But, it's 2021. We're looking forward. Martin, Chronosphere, company I'm somewhat familiar with, but a lot of our audience may or may not be. So let's start off with, if you wouldn't mind, your CEO, co-founder. Give us a little bit of the Chronosphere story. Maybe you could weave in how you came to co-found it and your background as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to. So at Chronosphere, we provide a hosted monitoring solution, purpose-built for cloud-native environments. So monitoring, as you know, has been around for forever. And in cloud native, it's just as critical, if not more critical, as it was before. And the thing that's really changed is that the thing you are monitoring has now fundamentally changed as part of this shift to Kubernetes and microservices, right? At the infrastructure layer, we used to be monitoring static VMs that would be around for a very long time. And now we're monitoring very ephemeral, short-lived containers. At the application tier, used to be monoliths, and now we're monitoring very dynamic, nimble microservices. So the thing you're actually monitoring has fundamentally changed, and that's created a need for a new tool that's purpose-built to monitor these environments as opposed to our legacy ones. So that's really what we do here at Chronosphere. And a little bit of the history and my past is that, for the 4 years before I founded Chronosphere, I was leading the core observability team at Uber, where we were very early adopters of cloud-native technologies, and we firsthand experienced all of the difficulties when it comes to monitoring these particular environments. So we actually built open source tooling to solve these problems for ourselves at Uber. And then about a couple of years ago, we decided to leave and start a company and build on top of this open source tooling that we had developed to create what is today known as Chronosphere.
Excellent. And just to bring this point home, Martin, I don't remember if it was you or someone else I had interviewed that told me like the average life expectancy of a container or certain kinds of containers are like seconds.
Yeah.
Right? I forget what it was, 5 seconds, 15 seconds, something like that. And, so when we talk about a different mission of monitoring, a VMware instance, for instance, and versus monitoring containers, the idea of immutable infrastructure takes on a whole different, it really brings it home.
Yeah.
Right. What a different mission it is. So it is hard. And, what I find interesting is, look, there are a lot of open source monitoring tools, right? Prometheus has gathered a lot of attention and users and CNCF and all of that good stuff. But like we see with a lot of open source tools, they're great until they're not. Let's put it that way, right? Yeah. When you reach a certain scale, you reach a certain complexity, even if you want to build on top of what you're doing with Prometheus or some of the others, there needs to be more. There needs to be like an else, another that kind of gets you to it. And that, kudos to you and the Chronosphere team for recognizing that and building out the more, right? The rest of that. I did mention it's chronosphere.io. I want to make sure people recognize that. But Martin, you're here to share some recent news with us on Chronosphere. Why don't you tell the audience?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a little over a year since we chatted last at KubeCon in San Diego in person. I think if you look back to November 2019, the company just had come out of stealth. In fact, I think the chat that we had was the very first video we ever did. Company was very small. It was only 11 folks at the company at the time. We had our very first version of our beta software there, and we were onboarding initial beta customers. So really over the last year and a tiny bit, we've been growing the team rapidly. So the team's now 50. And a lot of that focus has been on product and engineering. We've sort of not only developed the beta version, but sort of iterated that over the last year. And we announced the general availability of the product about a couple of weeks ago. So that was something we've been working hard on for a year. And then on top of that, we sort of announced new funding as well. So we did a $43 million Series B that we announced a couple of weeks ago, along with the GA announcement as well. So it's been a busy year for us for sure.
Congratulations, man. That is fantastic. So I guess I didn't realize that maybe I did when we met in San Diego, that you guys were new, just coming out and stuff. But what a great year for you, right? In spite of in spite of everything 2020 has thrown at the world, right? You've been able to go from like 0 to 50 and raise $43 million in a Series B, as well as push out a general release version of the product. So that's amazing, man. And congratulations to you and the team. Really, really, really proud of you guys, Martin.
Thank you.
It's impressive. Now, you said you built a lot of what you've done at Chronosphere on top of the open source sort of work you guys had done at Uber and other places. So in your mind, is Chronosphere a cloud native product?
Yeah, because Chronosphere is a cloud native product. So we definitely started by building the fundamental pieces of our solution in the open source project. And to your point earlier, Prometheus is the de facto open source monitoring tool, but there are deficiencies with it, especially as you start to scale out. So, when we built the open source project, which is called M3, we actually purposely designed it even at that phase for the cloud native environment. So back to something else you said earlier, we're not looking at VMs anymore that last hours, right? Or even years. We're looking at containers that last a few seconds. So that shift fundamentally changes the way you think about the data that's being produced, the way you store it, the way you index, and you really have to purpose build for that from the beginning. So we're lucky that we got to experience that problem fairly early on at Uber and started to build the foundations of the solution. And then to your point, open source software is generally, not really a end-to-end polished product, right? There's a lot of potential there, and it gives a lot of nice properties. But what we've been doing at Chronosphere is building on top of those properties and the potential, then really giving folks a end-to-end polished product on top of that. I think so. So that's really what we've been working on at Chronosphere.
Fantastic. Martin, I have a lot of friends who are in this, not necessarily competitor to Chronosphere or monitoring, but in the open source, and then commercial products built on top of open source. And I've been involved in this space for 15, 20 years, meaning open source and stuff. There's usually a very defined pattern that customers, their journey is. Right. So a customer, look, they have a problem. They have they're looking for a solution to a given fact pattern. They see an open source project which can help them. They'll start using that open source. They get smart about that open source project. They join the community. They install the open source project. They mature with it. And then there comes there's usually some very clear road signs that says, okay, it's time to look at something commercial perhaps here, right? You've taken the open source as far as you're going to be able to take it. You need to supplement it, replace it, build on top of it, whatever. I'm wondering if you guys at Chronosphere yet have kind of defined what are the 2 or 3 road signs that point to, okay, it's time to come to Chronosphere.
Yeah, 100%. So I would completely agree with you there. I think for us at Chronosphere, what we see is that the open source project that we have, which is M3, or even Prometheus, if you're using that, it's not the whole solution. You do need to piece it together with other components as well, right? So those are good technologies for storage. You need the dashboards on top for the monitoring use case. You need the alerting platform and things like that. So even when you start off with open source, you're piecing together multiple open source projects to give you really a end-to-end solution. So I'd say that's probably the first part. The second sort of sign I would say people see is at a certain point you start to having to firefight or start to run into issues managing this software at scale in production. And when it's your monitoring stack, when that goes wrong, it almost takes priority over everything else, right? Because without that, you lose visibility on all of your other services on your infrastructure. So when customers start to feel the pain of having to constantly firefight the open source technologies that they're using to maintain the visibility that they get from the monitoring software, that's generally a pretty big sign that you should probably turn to a commercial solution or at least a hosted solution another company or another team like ours can deal with all of that management overhead and the difficulties there for these particular companies.
Excellent. Let's turn back to the news around the money raise.
Yeah.
So, you've got your product out in GA, you've raised a decent amount of money now. What, I've done this, right? I've, helped several startups. We're venture backed. And at this point in the game, you've got this money. You don't want to spend it all, right? But you realize you need to put even more resources into engineering and R&D because you got to keep developing. You have plans, right, to take this to the next level. But at the same time, now you have money, but with money comes boards of directors and investors who say, hey, how's the business growing? And they measure the business by revenue and by customers and ARR and all of those great things. And you got to start answering. So plans for the money, both, are beyond just we're going to put some in engineering and some in sales or marketing. Take me down 2 layers from there, Martin.
Yeah, for sure. And you said it right there, that there are plans on both sides of the business, I would say. So on product and engineering, that's really where most of our focus has been in the past year. 2/3 of the team is in product and engineering, and we're definitely going to sort of double down there to continue building more features in the product. So that's definitely where part of the funds will go. If you look at what those projects and features are, it's sort of going to be, extending the product to do even more than it does today. So today it is a monitoring product, and a monitoring product is great to notify a end user when something is wrong and help them triage what the issue is, and what is impacted and how quickly they have to respond. But beyond that, you want to do other things as well. You want to sort of get to the details of what is causing these issues and resolve those fairly quickly. So for us, you can't have one without the other, and our product right now focuses on the first piece, which is letting somebody know when something is wrong. Of course, the natural next step there is to sort of help them identify what that is and get that resolved fairly quickly. So that's probably where a lot of our efforts will be on the product and engineering side of the next year. On the sales and marketing side, we actually haven't put a huge focus on that in the past year. We even today don't have a marketing team, and we have a very small sales team. So definitely starting that and really focusing on the go-to-market over the next year for sure. Now that the product is generally available, is going to be a huge focus for us. We do now have production paying customers, so there is recognized revenue now. So yes, along with that, sort of as you alluded to, pressure to sort of grow that nicely over the next year as well. So yeah, that would definitely be a huge focus for the company as well.
Got it. So and I don't even know if you guys have kind of finalized this, but is the go-to-market sort of a self-service model where start with the open source product and then, work your way up into the commercial version? Or is it more of let's target certain accounts or verticals or what have you and reach out proactively?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's not the self-serve model, and actually our open source project doesn't necessarily, like folks who would be good customers of Chronosphere don't necessarily need to run our open source project, right? A lot of people out there just running Prometheus and scaling that, and when they run some of those pain points would be ideal targets for our product, which is the hosted product. I would say in terms of like verticals, we're not really targeting a particular vertical because the monitoring problem is really fairly universal across all types of companies. What we found as a pretty good indicator for us is how mature a company is in their sort of adoption of cloud native architecture, in their adoption of Kubernetes and microservices. And what we generally find is that probably the larger tech companies right now are most ahead in their adoption of this technology. So they're probably the ideal targets for us. And we do sort of do an outbound targeted approach to those particular companies. But more and more, we're actually seeing companies being born in cloud native. So newer companies that are only 2 to 3 years old are quickly running into this problem as well. And they sort of run into the pain points of Prometheus themselves. And they're pretty good companies for us to go after. And finally, even the probably traditional enterprise, we're starting to see new projects and new business units start off cloud native as well. And again, those are great targets for us. So it's not a particular vertical, I would say, but how mature a company is in their adoption of cloud native is the leading indicator for us. And we go out and target those particular companies.
Fantastic. One last area I wanted to hit with you. So one of the buzzwords in the last year or so is observability.
Yeah.
Observability, right? Everything that was monitoring and management has all they've put the observability tag around all of it. But I noticed you haven't used that word.
Yes.
Is that on purpose, or what do you think?
Yeah, it is on purpose for sure. So, if you look at observability, everybody talks about the three pillars. You have metrics, you have logs, you have distributed traces. You need all three, we believe for sure. But for us, the first thing that breaks when you adopt cloud native is monitoring. So if you can't solve that problem first, you're not looking through your logs. If there's nothing that can even tell you that something is wrong and how badly it's wrong, you're not even getting to the logs or the distributed tracing components yet. So we wanted to target the problem where it starts, which is in the monitoring aspect. And as I mentioned, for some of our plans, there is definitely sort of plans to solve the other problems that the other properties give you as well. But our approach of solving it isn't sort of just providing three siloed, isolated solutions saying, hey, we have all three pillars, here you go. Our approach to it is, all of these tools is really to serve the incident management use case. And how can we provide the best solution for that? It definitely starts off with the monitoring. And we don't actually think it's three separate tools. It's one tool that you can expand over time to really solve the case end to end. So it is on purpose, and we do think it is a little bit of a buzzword, and we wanted to be more clear that the solution today is to solve the monitoring problem that you have today. And over time, it will solve more than that. So
fantastic. Martin, first of all, thanks for coming on and sharing with us here on TechStrong TV. Secondly, congratulations, man. It's hard in 1 year, a little over a year and 2 months, and you look at what you guys have accomplished. You're kicking butt up there, man. Good for you. Keep it up. I think part of the reason is that you're in the right place at the right time with the right kind of solution. So keep doing what you're doing. Don't wait a year to come back and visit us, because I don't know when we'll see each other in person, but you can always come on here and talk with us, okay?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Alan. It was great to catch up again.
Absolutely. Martin Mao from Chronosphere, and it's chronosphere.io. They're in general release. You could go check it out and use it right now. Just raised a really nice series, healthy Series B. You're going to be hearing more about them. Watch them, and hopefully you'll see them here on TechStrong TV. That's it for right now. We're going to be right back with our next guest. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up, Aaron Newcomb from Sysdig and Alan parse out the results of the 2021 Sysdig Container Security and Usage Report. They'll be talking about what that means for the container security landscape in general and what organizations can expect in the next year. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another session for TechStrong TV. My guest this section is Aaron Newcomb. Aaron is with Sysdig, and he's going to tell us about some interesting research in the 4th annual Sysdig survey they've done. And maybe we'll do a little Sysdig background too. But first, let me welcome Aaron. Hey, Aaron, welcome to TechStrong TV. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Aaron, always good to have folks from Sysdig on. We've done Sysdig coverage, obviously, in the past. But before we jump into the survey and the results and the research you've been doing, let's, if you don't mind, give our audience a quick background on Sysdig, sure. and maybe yourself as well.
Absolutely. So Sysdig develops software to help secure DevOps teams run and get more information out of their environments for both security and for monitoring. So if you're on a DevOps team and you need to see, you need to be able to scan your images or detect for vulnerabilities or provide audits back to your security folks, make sure you're in compliance, make sure your containers are running correctly, you can install our software and we'll help you do that. As far as myself, I am a product marketing manager, been in the industry for, let's just say, over 20 years. I think that's a high enough number. I don't want to date myself too much. Working most recently for several monitoring companies. Mm-hmm.
So been in the monitoring space for a while, absolutely. And look, we've certainly seen no lack of companies coming out of the woodwork around container security, cloud native security, and so forth. But Sysdig's been a company that's been at this now for some time, and they came at it from the monitoring and security space, and they continue doing it. And they're certainly not one of the Johnny-come-latelys to this. Aaron, and speaking of that, this is actually the fourth year that Sysdig, right, has been doing this survey around container monitoring, security, and stuff like that. You take the lead on it. Is this your first year on the lead on it, or have you been doing it previously as well?
This is my first year taking the lead on the report. Of course, I've done other reports in the past for other companies, but this is the first time doing it for Sysdig. Excellent.
So, if it's okay with you, let's dive into the report and tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. So the report is chock full of information that comes from real world data. This is data that comes in from our users. It's a subset of over 1 billion containers, individual containers, over the past year that we pull in this data from. So it's a very large data set. And what we found are some surprising things, at least to us, and we think the readers will find it surprising as well. The first one is that 2/3 of all companies are actually scanning their images in the CI/CD build phase. And what that means is that there is a trend, even with security, container security specifically, towards shifting left. And then, it's a big buzzword, obviously, in the DevOps space. But because we can tell that people are scanning their images early, that means that they really are trying to implement shift left policies, if you will, that help them scan earlier, and hopefully that will try to stem off some issues that might come if you weren't doing that. If you were only scanning in production, maybe you'd miss something or have an incident that was more impactful than it would have been if you caught it in development, for example.
Excellent. I think we've heard this before. I don't think that's necessarily new news to a lot of people, but I think the good news is that we're seeing this pattern become the norm, right? It's growing, and that's the important thing there. What else? What else do you have here?
Well, the only issue with that, we all agree that that's great. The problem is that we still find a lot of misconfigurations, if you will. So we did find that 58% of containers are configured as root or running as root. So you take these two things side by side and you say, okay, well, we're getting a good start on this, right? But we still have things that are finding their way through. Misconfigurations are happening. Of course, vulnerabilities can happen at any time because you never know if a vulnerability is there until somebody uncovers it or unfortunately takes advantage of it. So you still need to have the runtime security component of this to be able to detect, for example, when someone somehow gets into your system and starts changing things, right? Or starts deleting their bash history or introducing software. So the two things are opposed to each other, but it points out the principle that just shifting left isn't enough in and of itself, right? You still have to be vigilant. You still have to be configuring your containers correctly and so forth.
So, listening to this and thinking on it, Aaron, I think to myself, when back in the day when we used to say, oh, no, that wasn't a bug. It was an undocumented feature. No, it's not a misconfiguration. We intended everyone to run this thing as root. And you got to ask yourself, that is, a vulnerability is one thing, right? You may or may not know there's a vulnerability. You may or may not have time to patch the vulnerability or install the new version or whatever you want to do. But to knowingly allow your containers to run as root, that's really incompetence. It's not just misconfiguration. It's negligent at some level, no?
That's right. No, I log in as root, right? Back in the day, no one's going to get into my system. I don't care. Of course, this is when the internet was still young. But, now we have practices that say, no, you absolutely do not do that. You don't run as root, and you don't run containers as root. And so I think this is hopefully a wake-up call to folks to go out and at least have tools that can help you check if that's the case, because you may not even know that your systems are running as root. You should know, but
that's a great point, Aaron. I got to assume that people don't knowingly pick, like there's a box here. Well, before I deploy my container, there's a box. You want to run as root, yes or no, and they hit yes. I would hope that that's not the case. I think the more obvious one is they didn't realize that it was running as root. I hope.
Yeah. And of course, sometimes you need to run containers as root. There are administrative tools, for example, that you do need to run as root. There are good reasons to run containers as root, but 58% does seem a little high.
No, but on top of that, Aaron, look, maybe I need to give Aaron root access. That doesn't mean everyone gets root access. That's right. And I think the other problem that compounds this is that, we found that, 22% of containers are running for less than 10 seconds, right? And half of the containers are running for less than 5 minutes. Wow.
So you have a set of containers that is running for such a short period of time that is certainly long enough for someone to get access and do something nefarious, but maybe not long enough for you to capture data to see what they were doing. So we also point out as a security risk that you need to make sure that you have tools that give you, sub-second granularity in terms of being able to capture activity that's going on in those containers, because you just, that could be a tactic that people take advantage of. They know that a container is only going to run for a few seconds, and it's going to be hard for people to find out what they're doing, so they take advantage of those.
Let's hit those numbers again so our audience gets it. Was it 22% run for less than 10 seconds? And what percentage for less than 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure. So we discovered that 50% of all the containers we scanned live less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
50% and 5 minutes. 50% are less than 5, and 21%. I may have said 22 before, but 21% of containers live less than 10 seconds.
Wow.
Now,
phenomenal.
Some of those,
talk about ephemeral.
Right, and some of those could be, development environments. It could be that people are running functions in those spaces, like you would do with AWS Lambda, but they want to run them locally, so they just spin up a container, run the function, and shut it down. That's possible. There's no way for us to tell for sure, but that seems unlikely that there should be that many that are running for such a short time period. But in any case, you still need to be able to inspect those when something goes wrong and provide an audit trail. Especially if you're a shop that has to adhere to compliance standards.
Absolutely. Aaron, let's great stuff. What else do we have in the survey, though? Let's go through some more of this.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple other things that we found that are kind of interesting, and they fall into a couple different buckets. We'll cover them quickly. The first one is on the container registry side. So what we saw from container runtimes, not registries. I always get those mixed up. Container runtimes. So we do see a decrease this year in people using Docker as a runtime. and an increase in Containerd and CRIO. Now, this is to be expected, I think, a little bit. But we saw that Docker dropped 50% year over year from last year, and both Containerd and CRIO went up by 200% each, or 2x what they were last year. So I think this is in line with what we're seeing in the industry. I don't know if you agree, but I'm sure you're aware of Kubernetes, saying that they're going to be deprecating Docker as a runtime sometime later this year. So I think this is, the users actually, keeping up with the trend that's going on. They're actually implementing these changes now.
I mean, it's good to see them getting out ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I think this has been foreseen for a while now, but this is just the first year where we've actually seen data to back up the fact that people will be shifting at some point or another. We've also seen an increase in container density again this year. We've seen it every year for the past 4 years we've done this report. Container density is increasing, and we saw 33% growth in container density this year compared to last year. So people are finding more and more ways to squeeze more containers onto an individual host, which is great for efficiency.
Sure. Excellent stuff.
Yep.
What
the
more?
last thing I would point out is we are seeing, or it appears that people are turning to open source and open standards to meet both their security needs and their monitoring needs. So, for example, Sysdig contributed the open source project Falco to the CNCF a few years ago, and we saw a 300% growth in Docker Hub pulls this year for Falco as compared to last year. So people are definitely choosing open source, and it makes sense actually in a lot of ways, because those are projects you can contribute to. If they don't have the rule that you need for your environment, that's something that you can add very easily. And so we're really glad to see that the adoption of open source Falco is increasing, and Prometheus use also seems to be increasing. So when we look across the different ways that people collect metrics using our tool, which is primarily Prometheus, StatsD, and JMX, we see a 50% increase in Prometheus metric collection and a corresponding decrease in StatsD and JMX. It's not that those are bad ways of doing it, but it's just interesting to see the growth in Prometheus as more and more people deploy it and use it as their standard means for collecting metrics.
Yeah, no, certainly Prometheus, it's no pun intended with containers, but it's a whale, in this market. It's really become the standard. And I think it's going to create, there'll be a whole ecosystem around that. I think there already is, actually, the same way there is around Kubernetes. It just, this whole cloud native space is spawning entire ecosystems of open source projects, commercial companies, and of course driven by users. So, again, not surprising, but good to see the metrics backing that up, really confirming the story that I think we all felt.
Yep. And there's lots of other data in the report too. Those were just a few highlights. That maybe covers 10 or 20% of the report. So there are a lot of other things in the report, ranging from a breakdown of how many people are using public versus private repositories, for example, for their images, or how many nodes run on an average cluster, and how many pods run on an average node. All those basic types of Kubernetes statistics are all in the report as well. So I'd highly recommend people go out and take a look and see how they stack up against those.
So that brings me to the next question. Where can people get more info on the report? Can they download a version, or where should they be going?
Absolutely. So if you just go to sysdig.com, you can take a look at the latest blog post that I wrote, which gives an overview. It's a great shareable item if you want to send it to a colleague, just the blog itself. And then, of course, the link to the report is right there in the blog. You can download the whole thing as a PDF. And I highly encourage people to take a look at it.
Very cool. Hey, Aaron, thanks for joining us here on TechStrong TV. Great work on the report, man. I think it's some really important stuff. Good stuff.
It was a big team effort. Lots of people chipped in, of course, and
always is.
really, it really was a huge effort to kind of go through all those stats and analyze them, break them down. So I hope people find it useful.
Absolutely. All right. Aaron Newcomb from Sysdig. Go check out it's the 4th annual report they've done on this. Check it out. Check out Aaron's blog on it. Aaron, come back and join us soon with some new news and keep us posted. Keep up the great work.
Will do, Alan. Thanks a lot.
All righty. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, guys, welcome back. We now have the third part of the Haunted Hacker podcast series. Part 1 was on TechStrong TV Monday. Part 2 was on Tuesday. Today is the third part of the first episode of the Haunted Hacker podcast. So let's give it a listen.
There's Patrick. What's up, Patrick?
Yo.
So we have a lot of people here. I want to thank Kevin, too, for showing up and being part of the podcast. He and I go way back, and I'm proud to call him a friend. So questions, what MSF module are you using? So Colin, the module's really easy. It is the Android. You can see, just Control C this. Within Metasploit, Go ahead.
It just said the host would like me to unmute, so I muted.
Let's see. So the module that I'm using within Metasploit, so I'm not actually using a module, I'm using a handler, a multi-handler for the Android. And so with that, you set the Android and the payload, which is the interpreter payload for the Android device. And then you set your local host, you set your port, and then you just run it. And it basically acts like a netcat listener. And it listens on the port. I would suggest not using port 444, which is the default. Maybe hide it in 443 or 8080 or web traffic. That's probably the most effective and the least picked up on. And have you tried to run it on an Android device with any kind of malware protection software on it? So, yeah, so I have with the one in the UK and didn't have a problem with it, because when something is coming over and it's signed, a lot of the malware antivirus applications for cell phones, which are very few and far between, look at that and say, oh, well, it's signed, it's encrypted, there's not much I can see. Any type of antivirus has a problem with looking past the encryption. And so that's kind of a protection level. Who else? I'm sure, Patrick, you've used Meterpreter for Android devices and done APKs, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. You want to share some information about it?
Yeah, so I pack them up pretty good. So I mean, I got experience in Java programming and stuff like that. So, you know, I mean, my advice for trying to block something like that is not only on the certificate level, but you know, watch port traffic, obviously. most kids are like you said, they're going to use 8080 and 444, and something simple. Most of them are, just out there trying to see if they can get somebody,
Yeah, exactly.
Me, I'm a little more sophisticated. I use port numbers that are unrecognizable. And definitely, you got to understand SSH tunneling, PPS, so there's a lot more to it than, just hosting it on your Kali VM.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why I mentioned like AWS and external servers, because there's a lot of different ways that you can host that file and get away with it. I mean, it's really simple, but you have to look at the whole anatomy of the attack, right? You have to look at the way the APK responds, the way that the Play Store or whoever looks at that APK when you execute it on a phone. And the payload is really important as well. But if you can wrap it with some level of encryption and be successful at it, and like you said, like the Java signature and certificate is like really important, and that's where I went with it as far as like wrapping it and deploying it. Was I used a lot of that. So, anybody else have any questions? Was thinking more zero-day type protections. I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know any type of zero-day protection or antivirus or anti-malware for Androids. Because when you talk about zero-day protection, you're talking about protection for something that's not known. That's very difficult to even begin to fathom. Because if it's a 0 day, there's nothing that's going to stop it until it's identified, analyzed, and put into some sort of engine. So yeah, I wouldn't use 0 day in that. I would use more complex or complicated attacks, something that detects that. So what else? And this is your guys' time. Like, you can open up your mics and ask questions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about the exploit or even how I did this, but we can talk about whatever you guys feel is important. You just want to shoot the shit or whatever. What I do want to talk about and kind of promote is next week, me, Patrick, I don't see Ghost Exodus. He was here earlier. Ghost Exodus and Alberto are going to all get together and have a joint podcast talking about our lives with different groups. We all come from some very complex backgrounds. A couple of us have just recently gotten out of federal, oversight. So yeah, it's going to be really cool. And all of us have been in different groups, which kind of cross paths and kind of mixed and splintered. And yeah, it's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I agree. Such a mixture of, I don't know. It's so weird when I meet people and then you find out, that background of them, and you're like, oh yeah, I knew you. I seen you in a chat room one time or something. Yeah. It's just amazing, over the years, it's been interesting, man. So happy to be a part of the community.
For sure, yeah. I remember when you got sent to me, and I was kind of like, why do I need to talk to this guy? And then I figured it out, and it was kind of like a jaw dropper. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ghost Exodus, and I'm like, I kind of remember that too. And it just spreads, right? So I think we're all kind of getting over that past situation and kind of catching up. And like the term birds of a feather flock together is an absolutely true term, because I think people like us with our mindsets, doesn't matter how much time or how much distance has occurred, we always seem to find each other on the internet somehow. And it's wicked.
That's true.
Yeah, it's wicked.
I agree.
Yeah. So we can't unmute ourselves. It's still disabled. Let's take a look.
I have a question, Mike. It's Vicky.
Hey, Vicky.
But I'm not putting my camera on because I'm like really tired and
That's fine. That's fine.
I look like shit too.
You look fine. But I don't know. You guys talked about. I missed the beginning, so before your friend was on. But did you all talk about what happened at the Capitol? And
just briefly, we didn't go into too much detail about it, but I'll give you my take on it, like a 10,000 foot view. I think that looking at the data, looking at the talk and the chatter on the dark web, looking at analyst comments, kind of observing from afar the whole situation, it was really interesting to see how the current president directed everybody to the Capitol that was at that rally.
And then took off.
And watched it from a tent as the Capitol Police opened the barriers and was waving people in. And then it got out of hand and things happened. It seems to me like there were two sides of it, but they were working together. And I don't think we'll probably ever know the truth about what happened, but I think the whole thing was staged. And, to think that Pence would go against the president and the president not know is kind of, I don't know, that doesn't ring true to me. And looking at some of the analyst comments and some of the chatter on the dark web, I think that, there's more to come. Don't get me wrong, but I think we're looking at a new type of government and maybe a new environment with more outside influence. When I say outside influence, I'm talking about, maybe some, not interference, but some influence with red countries. I think that's kind of where we're headed, especially with Biden.
Because I was thinking that maybe part of the people that were going in there were definitely foreign operatives. And
well, they've identified quite a few people that were in there that had been part of other movements like Black Lives Matters, like Antifa. They tried to identify one guy and say he was communist, but it was actually the tattoo on his hand was actually a gaming tattoo of some sort, which was really off. There was a couple people that were politicians' sons or judges' sons. Like I said, we'll never know the truth about what really happened unless an email server gets popped and we see that communication back and forth, which, I could assume that there's probably some groups that we may or may not have been associated with are probably looking at that right now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? You guys can unmute yourself.
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to go back to the exploit you tried running, and you were referring to packing the APK before. I've done some basic Android applications. What did you mean by packing? I didn't really understand that.
So when you create the APK, you have to put the payload in, right? That the APK has to have some sort of, transportation back to where you're at. So you have to embed that payload into the APK. Now, when I say pack, so there's several different applications like command line that you can use to create APKs that have malicious payloads, right? So Fat Rat, I know Patrick probably knows what Fat Rat is.
Right.
Yeah, and Shell Empire, stuff like that. Those tools are used to create like different APKs or EXEs or zips or whatever that have malicious payloads inside. And you can choose whatever payload you want. Like I use this because it gives me more control over the phone. But I could have set something up that made the phone call back on like a SSH tunnel or whatever. You can make it as complex as you want depending on what the operation is and what you want to achieve. But more importantly, so not only packing the APK, but actually doing the signing of the certificate and making it look legit. That's the most important part. So I would say look at how to sign APKs with Java. Look into learning about key stores and how those work. and maybe create a couple and test them on your own devices at home. Depending on how much you practice and what you learn about the architecture, the Android architecture, and the way that it verifies different packages, you'll have to play around with it and find out what works the best for you. But each person is different. Each hacker has their own routine. They have their own, really their own set of tools that they like to use, that they're comfortable with, and just go from there and do a lot of research. And learn about Key Tool. If you learn about Key Tool, you'll learn a lot about what I do. Anybody else?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Oh, not too bad. Another exciting lockdown time again. Yeah. It's more about the exploit. I'm afraid I'm completely green with this sort of stuff. I'm assuming that exploits like that you've placed on the phone, obviously probably invisible to the user of the phone and the like. And I would assume as well that accessible from anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. So when you build the payload, you're going to hard code the IP address for that payload and the port that the receiving end is going to listen to. So the way that we used that type of communication or that type of exploitation previously was we would compromise a machine overseas, or look at a shell server that we pay time on, or maybe like a AWS platform, and build the listener onto that platform or that shell device, and hard code the APK to call back to the IP address. And at any one time, I could have 50 sessions going at once with different phones or different devices. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers the question. Like I said, it's not something that I'm very knowledgeable about. My question is probably very basic in mannerism and things. But like everything else, it's something I probably have to read up a bit more about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so the way that I look at hacking, right? So we have people who are uber great at web hacking, web app, that's their thing. And then we have other people who are great at creating malware. And then we have people who, focus on creating botnets. That's just my specialty. Is I want to intercept communications. And so looking at cell phones, there's so much data on cell phones because people live their lives on cell phones now.
Oh, and
the knowledge and the information you can steal from a cell phone, it's like a treasure trove. So I really focused on that. I wanted to see the best way to get into those phones. I wanted to try different avenues and different attacks and see what I could do to be stopped and what got past those defenses. And over a matter of time, it became really easy. And you got to think about it too. So the government does the same thing. They'll access cell phones and cell phone records and all the above. Some warrant less. But really it's the same methodology. And they probably use some of the same tools because they're effective. And, pick your poison. Figure out where you're strongest at when it comes to exploitation, if that's your thing, and focus on it until you get it mastered. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, who knows? But mine is voice communications, communication intercept, and data exfiltration. So, and I know, Patrick, yours is what? Yours is a lot of application hacking and web stuff, right?
I mean, if I had to classify myself as something, I would say like a system hacker. It's about as rounded as you get it. Only because I have an IT background, so I spent most of my career in IT while being a hacker, so living the double life, more or less. Couldn't wait to get off work, So I developed probably over the last 15 years, different sets of skills. I've concentrated in each area, a little bit. Some things like you do, that I've never gotten into, like signal intelligence and stuff like that. So I never really touched too far into that area, but I'm pretty good with Wi-Fi hacking and radio technology as it is. But there's some things that I'd like to improve in myself. But and that's with being a computer hacker over 15 years.
Right.
So. A lot of people ask, where did you get started? And I'm like, I just got started. Find something, that interests you, by playing is doing. Because I think one essential skill computer hackers have is I have the ability to just, if I'm after, when I was a computer hacker, I would spend literally a year of my life. Every chance I get, I would be pecking at your website, looking for a way in. And as soon as it was vulnerable, I was getting them. It's pretty much how hackers really think, and at an IT level, I applied obviously what I was doing in my fuck off time to my job, and it made me an effective IT manager, so it's been pretty interesting coming up in the community,
I think most of us had kind of a double life. We had that 9-to-5 job, and we'd go home and, maybe sometimes play around at work, looking at the infrastructure at work. I know that when I became a director of security, I would, test the network myself and just play with new tools and see how our network reacted to it. But all that was sanctioned. But when I was doing illegal stuff, I was actually taking data and exfiltrating it and finding ways to hide database structures and stuff like that. But really, it's all about jumping in and just putting your hands on it. I mean, the internet has all the information you need. It's just a matter of having that motivation and the patience and the time to sit down and really teach yourself a skill. And people ask me, how'd you learn what you do? And that's the toughest question anybody can ask me. Like, I hate that question at conferences and when I'm doing talks, because I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's an ability. It's like we were kind of like born with that ability, like that ability to think that way. And I can't teach that to anybody. It's not something I can say, okay, this is what I do to look at a system. My mind, I think, works a different way than most people's. And I think probably Patrick's
outside the box thinkers, because whereas most people who were, like, for example, software developers, and they've never done anything in computer hacking, right? They write code and they can write more code and shit than I ever would imagine I can do, right? Right. But when it comes to like actual physical hacking, system hacking, they're lost. I can tear apart their code in 10 minutes where it took them 2 years to write.
Right.
It's because I'm not looking to rebuild their code. I'm just looking to screw it up. And once I do, how do I, use that to my advantage, with whatever I'm doing. So.
Yeah, it takes a level of creativity too. I think a creative mind is something that we all share.
Right.
Because, just
why not?
Exactly.
Try it. Why not?
I think I was asked a question about lockpicking last night, and they said, how do you do that? And my answer was, I just close my eyes and feel my way around. Like it's about envisioning what's going on the other end. And I think that pertains to network hacking and web app hacking and stuff like that, is you really have to envision it in your head as to what's going on while you're doing the operation. So it's really, you have to have that creative ability.
And for example, like, a lot of what we've done, in like hacking and hacktivism, this structure around a lot of like cyber war, there's a lot of stuff that went on in the community. People don't realize, 5 or more can gather for whatever reason, for whatever purpose, and make a bad day for somebody.
Right.
So there's always that, threat for whatever reason. So learning those tactics, learning how hackers think is very important on cybersecurity.
Yeah, and especially
you don't know how. Yeah.
Yeah, in the community too. I see, like, back in the day, I saw new people come into the community and they didn't know anything. They were complete, for lack of better terms, they were noobs, right? So they come in the community and they start asking questions. Can you teach me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do that? And back then, that was looked down upon. Like, we wouldn't help those people. Because the trade craft that we had, it was like our trade craft is our secrets, right?
Was no GitHub.
yeah, there was no GitHub. You had to learn it by yourself. And so when people ask me, can you teach me to be like you? And it's like, how do I do that? Like, I don't think I'm capable of cloning myself. I don't think I could take somebody and give them what I have completely. Because I didn't have that. I wouldn't know how to teach the way that I learned, other than just being curious and having that, I wouldn't say malicious mindset, but that dark streak that sometimes I dance the line, and back then I would go over the line to see where it would take me.
Yeah, our generation was a little bit different. I tried to do that, especially like in hacktivism. I've been a computer hacker a long time, but when I got into hacktivism,
different story.
One thing that I always enjoyed, though, is through the community, I would always, get these kids now 5-6 years later that knew me back in the day, like, oh, you inspired me, and to see them doing good, and they're on the right side of cybersecurity, and they got their OSCP or something like that, and they just went complete the right direction, because they've seen it as a different mindset. I always told them, like, you don't have to steal people's money to be a good computer hacker. You never had, like, and I respected the guys from like Shadow Crew and like all those old groups and stuff like that. I've been around the community a long time, but I think that, you really don't have to really commit some severe computer crimes to like be an actual, elite hacker, somebody that's respected in the community,
right.
You can do your thing and easily, gain respect.
And I think that's kind of like the backbone of the Haunted Crew, is that a lot of us come from that background. We've committed, some serious cyber crimes, but the way that we look at it now is, the world's a different place. We're different people, and we're going to make a difference the way that we know how.
Right.
And that's sharing information, kind of doing some tutorials to teach people, a little bit of what we know, and just being a sounding board for, people coming into the industry, and kind of give people the idea of, this is a route that this person took. Like, Kevin took this route. Greg took this route, and give you like a wide variety of successful people that we know and the different ways that they got there. And you can take that and kind of look at your own life, your own skills, and figure out where you want to be and how to get there. Because back then, we didn't have that. There was no such thing as, internet security when I first got in. That was something that we kind of like trailblazed.
Hacking was like more of like rebellions, remember? Like it was like our counterculture. Like we just did it to, we fucking smacked somebody up and laughed about it. And like, cool, and we would read like the Frack or, stuff like that back in the day. But
and the Hacker Manifesto and all that stuff.
Right. And that's about as far as we got. We never really had like, I remember when, there was some set of scripts. What was it called? Wax or something. And then that was like a precursor to like Backtrack. And I remember when that came out, and it was probably 2006, 2007, something like that. But I remember jumping on it. I'm like, sweet, I'm like, I have to write my own shit. Like, it was just convenient to have like all that set of tools, one spot. And, not have to scavenge.
As time has gone by, though, we've seen that type of, tool set or whatever evolve into platforms for pen testers. And a lot of this stuff is automated. And what I found is that people will learn those tools and not really know what's going on behind the scenes. like not know how that tool really works and the exploits behind it. So when people come to me and say, hey, do you know how to use Rapid7, Nexpose or whatever, teach me how to do that. I'm like, no, I'm not going to teach you how to use a platform. You need to go out, look at the code, figure out how that exploit works. Because, you start firing exploits at random stuff, you don't really know what's going on. You can cause a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And they're not educating themselves on what really happens and
no Hail Mary.
Yeah. Don't do that. Yeah, a lot of people don't learn the methodology and the mindset and how to approach a network or a system. And they're told, just plug this in and hit this button. And the whole AI thing and the whole automation, I think, does the whole industry a really bad disservice, because the more automation that gets involved with pen testing, the less the humans involved. And really, it's the human mind creativity that makes a pen test successful. It's not the tool. It's the knowledge of the tool and the creativity to use that tool in various complex situations. Johnny says, isn't it curiosity and passion that drives one forward? What is focused on is individual. Some dig deep, others are content with less, e.g. your explanation with tools versus detail. Yeah, so the whole, definition behind what is a hacker, I think in the manifesto, the Hacker Manifesto, they mentioned something about hacking is not a physical crime or a malicious crime. It's a crime of curiosity, which it is. So a lot of us have been caught up in, let's say, a cyber crime that was strictly spurred off of being curious. And a lot of us, our natural background or the way we are as a person is curious. I've been curious since I was a kid, digging into. So I'll tell you a little story about curiosity that got me into a lot of trouble that has nothing to do with hacking or computers, but shows that curiosity, right? So when I was a toddler, my grandmother had a tear gas gun in her closet. And I was always told to stay out of the closets. Well, you tell me to stay out of the closet, I'm going to plunder. I'm going to take my opportunity. I'm an opportunist. I'm going to wait until that closet's open. I'm getting in it. So I found this tear gas gun. I think I was 3 maybe. And I pick up this tear gas gun and I shoot myself in the face with it. Because obviously I didn't know what it was, but I knew you had to press something. And nearly blinded me. And so that same curiosity never stopped. You would think that when, a kid puts his hand on a stove and says, oh, that's hot, he's not going to walk up to something else that looks just like it and do the same. But I always wanted to test everything around me, whether it be a radio, a TV, a VCR, a laptop. I remember destroying my mom's first laptop that she brought home with a virus I'd written. So it's all about curiosity. And I don't try to stifle people's curiosity. I just try to get them to contain it. And when I talk to kids, I tell them that once you do have that ability to do the things that we do, it's like a superhero. And they can equate to that because they look up to that type of stuff and they're interested in it. And I tell them, with great power comes great responsibility. So you really have to contain yourself and learn how to, put yourself in check. And that's something that I didn't learn probably when I should have. Yeah.
There's some things that definitely have to be said, and it's something that, I've been trying to, speak out against. It's like, I've been a computer hacker a long time, IT professional and everything. I've never seen people slam in hospitals and, you know what I mean? Like, you ever see that, Mike? I've never seen that in my life, because no matter how skilled a computer hacker is, if he has that type of mindset and thinks in degree that I think we all think he's not going to do nothing like that and put people's lives in jeopardy for a buck.
No.
That's definitely where it's more nation state, because being under orders and under morals are two different things.
Right.
They don't equate. Right. You're being told what to do. Whereas a normal computer hacker like me, it's like, I'm not going to nail some hospital with ransomware. Like, what's the matter with you? It's just incredible what's going on. I never thought I'd see today,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't see why someone would attack like a retirement center or, insurance companies, other than to make a buck. But that's not who we are.
But is that not just criminal intent? The ones that are just after the money.
Well, it's not just criminal intent, right? So a lot of organized crime that, especially right now during the pandemic, a lot of those organized crime groups that operate on the streets had to move to another way to make money because they're not allowed on the streets. So they went to the cyber realm. So a lot of these people you see running ransomware or running phishing schemes, those are your organized crime groups that are trying to capitalize on a bad situation.
Carters have, you have a whole systematic level of steps, so you got the hackers, we hack into the database. You got mules, you got cash cows, there's several different, entities involved with it now. It isn't just somebody, hacking and dumping some cards and making some money off of it like they did back in the day. It's really thoroughly organized. Nation states pretty much primarily take part in it. For example, like North Korea, that as well, Mike. That's probably like a good portion of their budget. Is cybercrime, right?
Yeah. And like China, when sanctions get put on countries, all of a sudden you see like cryptocurrency, gets around because that's the only way that they can not be traced financially, So the things that you see like on TV and the cases that are exposed publicly, there's a reason for it, and a lot of it is making a example out of people. But you rarely hear about hackers stepping in to help. But it does happen. It happens quite a bit. A hacker helping law enforcement identify a person of interest. That does happen a lot. But we're always looked at as the evil people or the boogeyman.
I've seen people, what was it, the Steubenville, you know what I mean? It's a prime example of somebody, getting information that the cops didn't even have themselves, and he goes to jail longer than the people that committed that crime. I was like, that blew my mind. I remember that. I was like, wow.
Well, and look at some of the stuff that we did with Anonymous, like taking down ISIS profiles, putting together whole case files of thousands of pedophiles and handing them over to law enforcement. But they were considering that a crime. We were being looked at as like hindering investigations. And I'm like, no, we didn't hinder anything. We finished your investigation. Like the data's here. You don't even have to worry about investigation.
Back in the day, the feds told me all I needed to know, like with Aaron Swartz and stuff like that. Like I was just like, wow, like 30 years for that. Like, I'm like, it's really hard to rationalize. I would say that United Kingdom, other European countries, they have a little bit better of policy driven laws governing like cyber crimes, especially if it's around hacktivism or something like that. Because, I like to think of that as, like we always explain through the documentaries, like, it's no bit different than me getting 40 of my friends and preventing you from getting on the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we're just trying to, get our message across and move along, Yeah.
And I talked to the first big crowd that I talked to in Europe. One of the questions was, as far as DDoS, do you think that is illegal? And I'm like, you know what? If you look back to the 60s and 70s, right, and they had the protests of Vietnam, and people would have sit-ins, and it would sit in front of doors to buildings and keep people from accessing those buildings. You don't see them getting like 20, 25 years in prison for that. You see them probably going for 24 hours maybe. So, the cyber laws are very immature. I think it's going to take a lot to actually bring those to the forefront and change them.
That's a good point. Like there should be, different statutes that govern, financial crimes, hacktivism, and cyber stalking and there's other issues out there, that I've seen that got brought to my attention, probably near the end of my little hacktivism reign. But like some cyber crimes that I never really thought took place until you meet people that have those experiences, and you're kind of like shit, what I knew and my type of people would never do something like that, but other people learn the shit I know to do that, and it just so I feel like it taints what computer hackers really are, which are people who, in a nutshell, love technology. Yeah. It's really what it is.
Yeah, and curiosity and stuff. Okay, so next weekend, we'll continue this conversation with me, Patrick, and with Ghost Exodus, and with Alberto, hopefully. So same time next weekend. We have a store now, the Teespring store, with all the Haunted Hacker merchandise. We have that. We have the Discord server. We also have a Twitter account with all that information on it. So everybody's welcome on the Discord. But the same rules apply as a podcast. If you start, causing trouble, whatever, you get hit with the ban hammer, and we won't let you back. So be kind and courteous, and not talk a bunch of noise. So this podcast is really grown quite a bit. I'm really surprised, and I'm excited about the future of where this is going. And like I said, TechStrong TV has offered to host this podcast on their platform and help promote it, which will give us a lot more exposure. But I really like where it's going. I really appreciate everybody tuning in every weekend. I see multiple people tuning in every weekend, which I think is really cool. It's dedication to learn more about the industry. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast. And if you guys want to move over to the Discord, feel free to. I myself am going to grab something to eat and call it a night. So I will see you guys later. Thanks, Patrick.
All right, welcome back. In today's Something Old section, we have a recent DevOps Experience Virtual Summit conversation or discussion, if you will, with Corbin Pacheco, who's Senior Director of Product Marketing and Technical Marketing at at D2IQ. He has the results of a Kubernetes survey that the company did late last year, and he talks about the results of the survey, what were the top challenges with Kubernetes adoption in 2020, and take a look at the cloud-native landscape and technologies coming into 2021. So let's give it a listen.
Hi, and welcome to Kubernetes. What do the poll results show? I'm your host for this session, Corbin Pacheco, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Day2IQ. As a leader of the product marketing team, one of the main priorities is to keep a constant eye on the market, adoption patterns, and competitive landscape. There are a variety of inputs, including industry analysts like Gartner, Forrester, and others, movements in the open source community, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and the broader ecosystem. And most importantly, our very own customers and prospects at Day2IQ. We have counted the votes, and today we will find out what the poll results show. So where does the data come from, you may be wondering? Most recently, Day2IQ commissioned a market study from an independent research firm. The research gathered data points from 300 respondents across the US. 2/3 or 200 of the responses were from DevOps professionals, consisting of developer roles and platform and cloud architects. The remaining 1/3 or 100 of the responses from senior IT decision makers. In this talk, I will review some of the key findings and themes that are unfolding across the market. We will reveal the top pain points enterprises are facing with Kubernetes today, as opposed to what they may have been facing last year, or perhaps the year prior. The complete report will be made available in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Before we jump to the data, just a quick reminder of what organizations are seeking in the adoption of Kubernetes. There's a lot of promise. From pushing forward with a project as strategic as digital transformation, to obtaining better agility, improved uptime, application portability, and elasticity, to broader application modernization efforts and scalability, or for many, to optimize operational costs. With the massive benefits that can be had, none of that is possible without getting Kubernetes and cloud-native applications to production. Let's dive into the data and look at what survey respondents had to say about why they started their journey with Kubernetes. The polls are in, and the top 3 reasons enterprise started Kubernetes initiatives are: number 1, to improve operations. 57% of enterprises are looking for better agility in deploying applications, running applications anywhere, and being able to scale them on demand. What we know is that day 2 operations is where the real value exists, running in production. Number 2, half of enterprises are thinking about their customer experience. Digital transformation, the ability to ship new services or to add new capabilities are critical business initiatives, helping to retain and attract new customers. Improved uptime, performance, and elastic scalability are key to maintaining those existing relationships. And the third most significant reason enterprises are choosing Kubernetes is for the future success of their business. 46% of organizations believe Kubernetes to be a strategic investment, providing the agility they need to create or maintain a competitive edge in the market, and potentially even more important, to expand to adjacent markets with new products and services. With a solid foundation on why Kubernetes, let's take a look at where enterprises are in the cloud-native journey. What does adoption look like? What patterns are emerging? And how have things changed in the last couple years in the emergence of Kubernetes to the mainstream enterprise? Voters say Kubernetes is everywhere. Our first data point covers the rapid pace of adoption. We already know that Kubernetes is one of the fastest growing open source projects in the history, but how fast is fast? Looking back to 2019, Gartner predicted that by 2022, more than 75% of global organizations would be running containerized applications in production. But in the 2019 Cloud Native Computing Foundation survey released earlier this year, more than that are already running in production at 78%. The CNCF recorded only 58% the previous year. The CNCF survey may have some bias to cloud native users, so let's take a peek into what our polls show. With an unbiased audience, a staggering 89%, almost 9 out of 10 organizations are running Kubernetes today. With such broad adoption, the next logical question would be, is the adoption of Kubernetes all hype? But almost universally, enterprises running Kubernetes said it is a critical part of their digital transformation strategy. With the rapid rate of adoption and the myriad of ways to get there, it would seem a breeze to get started. However, survey respondents said it takes an average of 5 months to get there. Peeling the onion suggests that even with the choices out there, there's still work to be done. Do-it-yourself solutions that leverage open source tooling and projects are costly to assemble, requiring hard-to-find expertise or hiring out to consultancies. This can often elongate the process of getting to production. Cloud solutions are often considered the easy button, but can be incomplete. It may require creating custom automation, also integrating CNCF projects, or navigating the complexity of internal security policies within the enterprise. And some off-the-shelf commercial products are known to require months of expensive consulting to stand up. In many cases, shortening the time to production is shortening the time to value for enterprise organizations on the adoption train. Many organizations cited that navigating the CNCF landscape is a key challenge to adoption, but we will dig into that more shortly. So besides everywhere, how and where is Kubernetes being deployed? First is how. Most enterprises are using a combination of deployment methods and have clusters in multiple places. The polls show that there are many combinations to the how and where of Kubernetes clusters. 64% are using a Kubernetes management platform from Day2IQ and others. Roughly that same number of enterprises are also using a public cloud service. Surprisingly, only 9% are doing it themselves, and a reasonable number are relying on someone else to manage the service for them, 42% to be specific. This points to the maturity of enterprise-grade solutions now available on the market, and those organizations that once took a go at it themselves have turned towards more mature solutions instead of continuing down that path. Now let's turn towards where they are doing this. Polls show more than half of enterprises are running on the public cloud at 55%. 38% of the deployments are on-premise, and only 16% are on the edge. With the versatility of Kubernetes as a platform, there's inherent value in running Kubernetes clusters on multiple infrastructure platforms to serve a variety of use cases. Let's not forget that one of the key value propositions of containerized applications is portability. Is Kubernetes easy? Historically, we know that Kubernetes does come with a learning curve, and some people refer to Kubernetes as hard. But with such staggering adoption rates and all the different ways you can deploy, it would make more sense that Kubernetes is indeed easy. Let's have a peek at a few of the stats that address the user experience. 60% of organizations claim that all of their cloud-native applications made it into production in the last year. It seems that once you figure it out, organizations are getting them there. But 94% of respondents claim that Kubernetes is a source of pain or complexity for their organization. 78% of developers and architects cited that Kubernetes add-ons cause a great deal of pain, suggesting that integrating and managing their stack is challenging. But all said, 93% of developers and architects agree that building cloud-native applications make them feel excited to come to work every day. It seems that Kubernetes may not yet be all that easy, but worth the time and investment. Success with Kubernetes generally has mostly to do with having the right team in place. After all, when has acquiring a new tool been enough to get real value? It's an age-old saying in IT that it takes a combination of people, process, and technology to get the job done. So let's take a look at how organizations are addressing the challenge. As Kubernetes adoption skyrockets, so has the appetite of DevOps professionals to acquire the necessary skills. Most organizations, 96%, say they can find the right talent for their Kubernetes initiatives. More than half of organizations require external support in the form of partners, contractors, or professional services. 1 out of 4 said that hiring is a challenge, with 24% suggesting it can take a while to find the right candidate. Almost all organizations are investing or planning to invest in Kubernetes training to fill the talent gap. So what does this say about Kubernetes skills in the market? 93% of developers and architects agree that adopting Kubernetes increases their job security. And 81% believe that Kubernetes skills are critical to their career success and future job opportunities. Most DevOps professionals believe that Kubernetes skills are valuable today and in the future. Speaking of employability, it's 2020, and considering we are looking at modern trends in the Kubernetes market, it would be remiss to not talk about the impact that COVID-19 has had on cloud-native projects. As pointed out earlier, Kubernetes is central to almost all digital transformation initiatives. Seemingly, it is critical today that enterprises have a digital footprint. We have seen many industries hit hard by the pandemic, particularly the travel and leisure vertical. However, organizations that are nearly 100% digital have prospered. Video conferencing, telecommunications, streaming media companies, and video games have exploded as people quarantine in their homes. With the dramatic swings on both ends of the spectrum, what do voters say? The impact of COVID has been pretty broad for many enterprises. 37% of companies have seen project delays. 39% say that budget cuts have impacted their ability to acquire products and services. That same number have either slowed down hiring, and in some cases, that has even resulted in hiring freezes. The largest impact of COVID has been cuts to development, felt by 41% of organizations in the survey. This generally means that Kubernetes projects must be cost effective, and organizations have had to do more with less. Let's take a look back at some of the key points that the survey was able to surface. There is a clear value proposition to be had with the adoption of Kubernetes, and enterprises find it strategic to the future success of their business. Voters say that Kubernetes isn't easy yet. Challenges with building and maintaining a stack for production remains a key pain point. Building the right team is a critical ingredient, and enterprises are doing that in a number of different ways. Proper investments in training is a key contributing factor, and DevOps professionals find it to be a critical skill for future career growth and stability. Kubernetes is running everywhere, from the cloud, on-premise, to the edge. The portability of apps is a key value proposition that cannot be forgotten in the adoption of Kubernetes. Having a solution based on open source upstream Kubernetes is key to integrating with a wide variety of cloud-native tools and technologies. COVID-19 has put significant pressure on many organizations. Kubernetes solutions need to be cost-effective and enable cost optimization. And the last key point is that it isn't possible to realize any value without getting to production. Organizations are increasingly making it to production and face some challenges relating to ongoing operations. So as I wrap, I'll cover how Day2IQ helps customers achieve the benefits of Kubernetes and overcome some of the challenges that were identified as part of the market survey. Day2IQ's Kubernetes platform, or DKP for short, is a complete solution that includes the enterprise-grade technology, expert services, certified training, and expert support needed to ensure successful Day 2 operations. Or in other words, enterprise Kubernetes in production. Our technology solutions are based on best-of-breed open source components or built on open APIs to prevent lock-in and provide for a lower total cost of ownership. We help organizations build the right strategy to adoption that fits the needs of their business and enables their teams with the necessary training to make sure they have the right team in place. This is all backed up by an expert support team that will rescue you when you need it most, as questions or problems will inevitably come up. Visit the Day2IQ website to learn more about the Day2IQ Kubernetes platform, our customers, and how we can accelerate time to value for your Kubernetes initiatives and business objectives. As a reminder, this was just a primer for the upcoming ebook that reveals the rest of the survey data and insights on the Kubernetes market in 2020. The ebook will be made available on the Day2IQ website in the coming weeks. Thanks for joining. This was Kubernetes. What do the poll results show? by your host, Corbin Pacheco.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Thursday headlines. Before we get started on the headlines, though, I did want to give you a quick heads up. Today kicks off the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit. So I encourage you to head over to predict2021.com and check out the many presentations and discussions about what's in store for DevOps, cloud native cybersecurity, and more in the year ahead. It is bound to be a great event, so really check it out. All right, getting to the headlines now. First up on DevOps.com, we have the first in a series focusing on tools related to DevSecOps implementation. Don McVitie, who is both a regular contributor to DevOps.com and an analyst over at Accelerated Strategies Group, has been analyzing the DevSecOps space for a while now, and recently did a series of articles on the DevSec side of DevSecOps. Now he's embarking on looking at the ops part, starting with intrusion detection. This article takes a look at intrusion detection and its close cousin, intrusion prevention, from the developer perspective, and particularly how it can be improved through machine learning and its role in security, incident, and event management systems. For those not well versed in DevSecOps tools or security tools in general, this is a great primer on a useful technology. As I said, this is the first in a series of articles on DevSecOps tools, so expect many, many more articles from Don on this topic. Next up, we have a piece that looks at endpoint provisioning, which is something organizations have had to do a lot since the pandemic hit and everyone went home to work in their sweatpants. Unless, of course, the company is cloud-based, then endpoint provisioning is not a thing. But for those companies that are more legacy-based, provisioning can be a time-consuming endeavor. Not to mention the fact that buying workstations for all their employees can be an expensive proposition. That's why a lot of organizations are moving toward a bring-your-own PC business model, especially during the pandemic. Enabling employees to use their own laptop saves the organization time and money, and employees like working on their own machines. Of course, there are issues regarding endpoint security when provisioning doesn't take place. IT has no idea what type of security technology, if any, is on an employee's machine. Isolated workspaces, think virtual desktops or desktop as a service, they can be a good solution to the security issue. Isolated workspace approaches provide corporate security while permitting employees to do what they need and want to do with their machines, including things that might be questionable from a security perspective. Over on Container Journal, we have news from Hitachi Vantara, which launched a platform for managing Kubernetes environments that span multiple clouds and on-premises IT environments. The company also is launching its own distribution of Kubernetes, dubbed Hitachi Kubernetes Engine, for IT organizations that would prefer to have a vendor curate the open source platform on their behalf. In addition to tools for managing Kubernetes clusters, the software as a service version gives IT teams access to an application catalog to automate the deployment of complementary tools and applications. The company has also included a suite of tools for securing Kubernetes environments to reduce the need for IT teams to use multiple consoles. The company is just the latest to jump into the Kubernetes fray with its own distribution, which is quickly becoming a commodity to the main offering. which in this case is a platform for managing multiple Kubernetes environments, no matter what flavors an organization is running and where. And Fugue announced it has extended its eponymous platform for securing cloud environments to include container runtime environments. Specifically, the company is providing security and compliance tools for managed container services offered by AWS and Microsoft Azure. The company recognizes that it is more cost-effective for organizations to employ a platform they're already using to secure virtual environments running in those environments than it is to acquire a separate platform, especially since most IT teams will be running monolithic applications in the cloud alongside microservices-based applications built using containers for a while yet. Container security is becoming more of an issue as hackers have found ways to hijack containers to run cryptojacking malware on hosts. And as containers become even more ubiquitous in IT environments, companies such as Fugue will become more critical in helping keep those ephemeral environments secure. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at how organizations can balance security and user behavior in remote work environments. We all know that when the pandemic hit, security took a back seat as companies scrambled to get their employees set up with working remotely. Well, now we're 9 months or so into it. We are now seeing the repercussions of that lax in security. Malware incidents are up. Phishing attacks are now happening at different times to accommodate a workforce that is working at all different times. And access to inappropriate content during work hours has increased 100%. I'm not judging. This data is from a report from Wandera that measured cloud security during the pandemic. And this article takes a look at the ongoing issue of user behavior and security and the 2 essential steps that IT and security teams should take to better address user behavior and decrease risk for malware infections. And finally, we have an article that looks at how utilities can mitigate cyber threats. In the age of cyber espionage and malware, this is an especially relevant topic. The threat is only going to grow as utilities continue to digitalize. This article discusses what utilities need to understand with the risks at hand, how to mitigate them, and what they mean for the entire business operation. All right, that's it for today's headlines. Please check out back on Monday when I'll have a batch of the latest headlines for you. Until then, have a great weekend and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Chanel Chambers, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Tanium. Chanel, thanks for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I know about Tanium, but there's a possibility that there are some folks out there who are not as familiar with Tanium. So can you give us the elevator pitch, if you will, for Tanium?
Yeah, so Tanium is an endpoint platform that allows you to have visibility and control over all of your endpoints at scale in seconds. So Tanium is the supplier of endpoint management and security for some of our largest organizations, from the Department of Defense to many of our very large financial services institutions, retail institutions, healthcare institutions. So Tanium works very well at scale across hundreds of thousands of endpoints.
Awesome. So as part of that, obviously, you guys are working with a number of different technologies to, to ensure the security of endpoints. And one of the things that we recently got a bulletin about was the end of life for Adobe Flash, and that's kind of been popping up on my screen a lot lately. But what I'm interested in finding out, first of all, because people are inherently lazy, and they might not be, they may look at the Flash and they're like, all right, remind me later. But there's a real security risk to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So As you know, Adobe has announced the end of life for Flash, and Flash has a really long and storied history, which I won't go into. But yes, there's a huge security risk around Flash, especially as it goes end of support from Adobe. You might remember. Probably about 10 years ago, Steve Jobs had refused to actually support Flash on the iPad and the other iDevices because of the security risks. And now we see about 10 years later that even Adobe has decided to kind of retire that technology.
So do you think that, that Flash is inherently insecure because of just the fact that technology has moved forward and maybe Flash just isn't the right tool for the job anymore? And, it just really hasn't kind of kept up with technology, or are there other reasons why Flash is kind of considered a security risk, that it's just not up to par with what we need today for business applications?
Yeah, I think just like anything, technology evolves, and, HTML5 is now, the standard for some of the things that Flash used to do. So I think it's more of just the world has kind of moved on to more open standards and other ways of doing things. I think Flash was great for the time that it was developed and the time that it was being used. And now we've moved toward other things. So I think it's just the evolution of the way that things work.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense, and yeah. Certainly, when you mentioned Steve Jobs, it's like the light bulb was like, yeah, he was a little ahead of his time on that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
As he often was.
I remember when he made that announcement, I was like, no, then half of the websites won't work. But now, we're all kind of looking back and saying, yeah, he had a point. It's good. It's good, and the market has moved beyond that for sure. So, almost to the point where I wonder if organizations actually realize that that they're still perhaps using Flash in some way, shape, or form. And, we get to the end of the year, and even Adobe is saying, get rid of it, take it off your computers, But do you think that organizations are actually going to do that? I mean, are they going to be proactively removing Flash from their sites and or from the machines and what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, most organizations, if they don't have plans for getting rid of Flash on their devices, they should. So Adobe announced that they were going to end of life Flash, a long time ago. This is not a surprise, right? So, most organizations should have a plan for this because not having or using something that is end of life is really a reputational risk for organizations. I mean, this is something that could affect their, their security posture. It also affects what they look like to their consumers. I mean, how many times have you gone on a website and seen like .cfm at the end of something, meaning Cold Fusion? You say, I don't know about this organization. They're using really old technology, So it's not only a security risk, but it's also a reputational and a brand risk for people who really know what they're looking for when they go onto your website. So
best practices then for organizations to remove Flash, and especially in the time that we live in, where pretty much everybody's working remotely. How are organizations? What's going to be the best way for them to make sure that their employees are adhering to this end of life and removing it from their machines? Is it a matter of the IT department kind of working its IT magic to kind of go in and take it out of the machines via remote access, or is it going to be up to individuals to make sure that they no longer have Flash installed?
Yeah, I think this is an area for IT to really show some leadership in their organization. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both, right? I mean, it's important for IT teams to have visibility into all of the things that they are managing, or all of the machines that people are using to get work done. So they need to have good management practices. So they, if they are assets that are corporate owned, they can go ahead and scan for the affected applications and make sure that those are removed. There's also an educational element to this because, as we know, especially now with people working all over the place from all sorts of devices, there's some education that needs to happen as well with employees. So it's an opportunity for IT to really engage with users and engage with employees around not only that this is going end of life, but what could happen if you don't do it. And also to show some leadership around what works better for people. So it's that education. It's also, going in and managing where it can be managed. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay. All right. I think that education element is going to be super important because I don't think a lot of people quite understand what Flash does. And so telling them, this is what it does, this is how it can be harmful, and this is the technology that has been put in place to replace Flash. And by the way, it's so much better. I think
better. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think once employees, especially those who are not technical in nature, once they have that level of understanding, I think it's going to be a lot easier for them to kind of let it go, so to speak. So what I don't know, bit of advice would you give to companies who are perhaps maybe on the fence about uninstalling Flash? Maybe they don't think it's that important to do. Yeah, I know obviously you're going to say, get rid of it yesterday, but beyond that, or at least kind of helping them kind of get their employees more engaged and being, willing participants in the mass destruction of Flash.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's easy to say, yeah, you should get rid of it. But in reality, I mean, especially in some of the larger, more complex organizations, it's not so easy. So I do understand that sometimes organizations have a need for Flash, a true business need. So in those cases, you want to make sure that you that you are aware of where Flash is running and how it should be running. And if it runs in any way that it should not be running, then you make sure that you shut that down. The other thing is that you have a plan, right? I mean, so maybe you need it today, but is there a plan for re-architecting whatever the application is that you need in another way, to run in a Flash-free way? The other option is the other thing to do is to make sure that you do have some way of mitigating any problems that might happen. So that could look like an extended support agreement with Adobe, or it could look like some sort of, additional cybersecurity or endpoint security technology that you might use for those things. But you just want to make sure that those systems running Flash are as separated from the rest of the environment as possible. So just in case something happens, it mitigates the damage.
All right. Well, that's great advice, and hopefully one that a lot of organizations, most organizations, if not all organizations, will adhere to. Chanel, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Good stuff. And with so many things happening this year, support for or end of life of Flash is probably pretty low on a lot of people's list of priorities, but certainly it's something that organizations do need to take heed of, especially because of the risks involved with keeping it on the machine. So thanks again. I appreciate you kind of spelling it out for us, and hopefully more organizations will take your advice and just get rid of it altogether.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Thursday edition of the Webinars Preview. As I always tell you, we have a number of great webinars popping up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Wanted to give you a heads up about 3 that are coming up very quickly that hopefully we can get you signed up for and you can join us for them. The first one is a panel discussion that I'm actually moderating Monday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. I almost said December there, on Security Boulevard. The topic of this panel discussion is security issues and challenges with remote work, and it will feature an all-star lineup, including Pete Gurr with Dell Technologies, Jeffrey Martin with WhiteSource, Travis Gary of Teleport, and Justin Crawford with Echo, as well as Kaushik Guruswamy from Menlo Security. We are going to take a look at some of the issues and opportunities that organizations are facing in this new normal of remote/hybrid work, including how the pandemic has forced security as a whole to reassess itself. Take a look at some of the biggest threats that organizations are facing today, some of the lessons learned in shifting to a remote workforce quickly, and some of the challenges that continue and how organizations can address them effectively. I am so excited about this conversation. I hope you can join me for it because I know there's going to be so much information imparted, and there will definitely be takeaways no matter what type of organization you're in, how big or what industry vertical you play in. All right, the next webinar is happening Tuesday, January 26th at 11 a.m. The name of the webinar is Comparing Microsoft SQL Server 2019 Performance Across Various Kubernetes Platforms. It is sponsored by Diamante. This webinar takes a look at the results of a recent performance benchmark study to compare the performance of a Microsoft SQL Server 2019 on the Diamante Enterprise Kubernetes platform, the AWS EKS platform, and the Azure Kubernetes Service platform. Interesting stuff. It also takes a look at some topics, including platform considerations and requirements for running Microsoft SQL Server 2019, some performance comparison and analyses of running SQL Server on various platforms, and some best practices for running containerized SQL Server databases in Kubernetes environments. That one is going to be interesting. Okay, the last webinar I want to let you know about today is also happening Tuesday, January 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is preventing code tampering and verifying integrity across your software development lifecycle, and it is sponsored by Cycode. This webinar will discuss preventing code tampering across key phases of the software development lifecycle, including development, build, and production. And the attendees will learn some of the actionable steps that they can take to harden their DevOps pipelines now and increase the integrity of their software development lifecycle to minimize the risk of their code being tampered with. Definitely a good DevSecOps topic and one totally worth attending. All right, that's all that I have for this lineup of webinars that we've got coming up soon. But check back on Monday when I'll have a brand spanking new lineup for you. Until then, have a great day and stay safe. All right, everybody, welcome back. Finally, we have our Analyst Corner segment with Mitchell Ashley. He talks with Casey Zerkis of RSA Conference. She's a content strategist and a former Security Boulevard contributor. And Katie Nichols, who's the Director of Intelligence with Red Canary. They talk with Mitch about the upcoming RSAC 365 Virtual Summit happening January 27th. And Katie's talk, which is on balancing a more balanced approach to advanced persistent threats and how it should be part of a threat assessment and modeling strategy. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by a couple special people for an RSA conference that's coming up that we really want to share with you a little bit about. Give you a bit of a preview because I think you'll really want to attend. I'm joined today by Casey Zerkis, who's content strategist for RSA Conference. And one of the speakers at a talk and an interactive session is Katie Nichols, who's with Red Canary. She's Director of Intelligence. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Good to have you here. Well, let's first talk a little bit about the RSA conference. It's coming up on Wednesday, January 27th. And you can learn about it at rsaconference.com. A lot of good info, but tell us a little bit about, we're not in person this year, like everything else. And, it's
Indeed
not easy to do these things virtually. So it takes a lot of really some thought and strategy and planning. So share with us about what it's going to be like this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mitch. Great to be here. And this is our first full day multi-track event that we're putting on virtually. So it's been months in planning and we're super excited to be offering a really full agenda. We're covering 4 tracks, which include securing the remote workforce, analytics, intelligence and response, application security, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation. And so each of those tracks will have 4 sessions, those 16 traditional sessions in total. And then some of those speakers from each of those tracks will be offering, following their session, a live interactive Q&A, or what we're calling Ask the Expert session. And some of them, like Katie's, will be just asking questions. Others will be sort of collaboratively coming together for a particular goal. And then in addition to that traditional agenda, we have our sponsor showcase, and we'll have briefing sessions, and we'll have networking and interactive sessions over in the RSA Conference ICS sandbox, where there's lightning talks and office hours and capture the flag and all sorts of really cool opportunities going on. So a lot to cover in just one day, but we're super excited about it.
There is, and especially, I know we all go to RSA Conference for everything from I'm really interested in these topics, or I want to kind of upgrade my skills, get current with certain things, but also the interaction and the networking. Mm-hmm. So it's great to hear you're doing some lightning talks and schedule time, some networking kind of events. Tell us a little bit about how that part of it works and how folks can participate.
Yeah, so on the agenda, particularly on the sandbox, the ICS sandbox, you'll see within the sandbox section, there is a series of lightning talks that are, I think, 7 minutes each back to back. And then those will be followed by office hours. And we have 6 different industry leaders in ICS that will be engaging with attendees. It's capped at 15 participants, but it'll basically just be a 1 to 15 conversation, almost like a birds of a feather. If you attended a traditional physical conference, it's akin to a birds of a feather, being able to just sit around a table and have a conversation. And that's been the hardest nut to crack for us, is how to recreate those sort of hallway interactive experiences that people value so much about conference. And I think across the board, we've done the best that we virtually can with what we're offering, which is only a glimpse at what we'll. No, that's okay. That's okay.
I love the content topics that seems to me you've nailed it in terms of hot topics around analytics and securing workforce. Of course, we're all, something that we've all learned how to do much better in the last 9 to 12 months. Application security is hot. AI, machine learning is hot. Some really great spaces to be talking about. And I know from going to past conferences, sometimes you had to worry about room size limitations, and so you need to sign up for different sessions or anything like. Is there anything that people should do ahead of time before the 27th by going to the site, or is it no, you're good, just register and come on?
So I think it would be fruitful to go to the site beforehand just to sort of see what's out there. And as you do with conference, plan your day, because there are lots of things that overlap with each other. And you want to make sure that you're planning your time wisely. It is a full day, but you don't want to miss anything. Although if you do, it's available on demand. But there is another one session that is building the checklist. It's an Ask the Expert session, and that has a max of 40 participants. That's with, it escapes me, with Joe Kumerl from Salesforce. It's a cooperative learning building AppSec checklist. So that's, you want to definitely reserve a seat for that. But all of the other sessions, aside from those office hours, are open enrollment, shall we say.
Good. So maybe those few things you'll want to jump on if you really have an interest in that area, and of course get registered and participate. Anything else we should know about the conference? I mean, I'm sure the expectations are high. RSA conference events are always fantastic and great stuff in them. Anything else happening you want to share with our listeners, our watchers?
So I think one of the big things that we are doing with this that was different from our November event that you and I had chatted about, the just half-day seminar, is it's a full agenda across 4 different tracks, but we also have the sponsor showcase. And so, attendees will be able to see, the new trends and solutions and engage with sponsors and attend briefing centers with them as well. So there's so much going on. It feels almost like a day at conference, but it's just a one-day summit. So lots to look forward to. Yeah.
So expect your head to be full by the end of the day.
Yeah, which is why I say, definitely, even though it's like, oh, it's just one day, I can go in there and, jump into this or jump into that. But there's those briefing centers and the office hours, those are things that you can only take advantage of live. So you do want to sort of look at the schedule and figure out, like, okay, I can't miss that because I can't get it on demand. And like the Ask the Expert sessions, those are only available live. So you definitely want to plan accordingly to make sure you don't miss out on the good stuff.
Good. Excellent. Well, before we turn our attention to Katie Nichols and talk about her session, what she's going to be doing, tell us a little bit about how do you, RSA is the best of the best, at least that's what I consider it to be. And that doesn't happen through, just magic. There's a lot of hard work. How do you find the Katies of the world to be spotlighted and focused on, to have them come talk and have an interactive session? How did you get Katie to come?
Well, fortunately, Katie is a really good friend of RSA conference. So, we have a good relationship with her, and she continues to submit her ideas for our consideration year after year, which is great. And, I think because RSA conference is the premier cybersecurity conference, many experts of Katie's caliber do, come to us, and we've had the great fortune of building these really strong relationships with people who value sharing their wisdom with our audience. We have a great community of people who are knowledgeable experts and want to share that information. So we're really very fortunate. It takes a village.
It does. Yeah. And I think you hit on something really, I think, fundamental about RSA is there's a long-term relationship that we all build with each other and also with the conference. I've been going to RSA conference in probably 2002 or so, somewhere around there. Of course, things have evolved and changed over time, but it's great to have that sort of center of the universe where we all can congregate and continue to build our relationship and our knowledge and just further the community of cybersecurity and what we're all doing in it. So thank you for your part in that.
Of course, I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's turn our attention then to Katie Nichols. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of what you do at Red Canary as Director of Intelligence.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Mitch. Pleasure to be here. I'm currently, as you said, the Director of Intelligence at a company called Red Canary. If you're not familiar, we do managed detection response. We have some fun open source projects like Atomic Red Team. And I have the joy of getting to look at a whole bunch of different threats every day and trying to figure out how to protect our customers and the community against those threats, figuring out what are they doing and make the bad guys have a bad day is how I describe my job. Yeah, I stole that from my teammate, Tony, to be honest. But
well, let's give Tony the credit, but that's a great saying. How do we make the bad guys have a bad day instead of us? Good
exactly.
idea. Well, tell us about your topic that you're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so my topic ties very closely to my background. I've been in cyber threat intelligence for over a decade. I started with government contractors, part of the MITRE attack team previously. And something that I've noticed over the many years that I've been in this industry is that this industry focuses a lot on APTs, on advanced persistent threats, which most people think of as state-sponsored actors, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, etc. And what I found, especially in my current role at Red Canary, is that APTs are not always the biggest threat to most organizations. And so my talk kind of talks about how our focus as a community on just APTs has really ruined everyone's understanding of what value you get from cyber threat intelligence, which is not just about APTs.
What do you think it gets such attention? Is it sort of the shiny object for the boardroom, or just sounds, like the next James Bond movie coming out? We're talking about Russia or whoever. Why does it get so much attention?
It's a great question. And I talk about a few key factors that I've seen throughout my talk. And one of them is, as you said, the allure of espionage. This idea that the spy versus spy, it's kind of intriguing. And I'm not going to lie, as an analyst, if I have the option to dive into some new Russian malware or another, commodity malware sample, you're kind of like, ooh, this spy stuff is kind of neat. So there's some of that allure. Some of it's honestly the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD that these adversaries create. And honestly, myself as an analyst, this community, we have to be aware of how we talk about these state-sponsored threats. And to some extent, we all have to take a careful look at, do we spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt with any kind of actionable solution? You see headlines out there about, Russian targeting of different organizations. And it's very tempting as a community to just spread that FUD, as I call it, without any actions on what you should do about it. So I think really the scariness of thinking, you have the entire resources of foreign government coming after your organization, that's a little scary. So I think that's part of it as well. And that, that threat shouldn't be underestimated. But I think the challenge that we've seen is that it's just overcompensated for, that people think that because APTs are what gets the headlines, that's what, I kind of think is interesting to look in. That's what my boss asked me about, that's the biggest threat. And what we found is that's really just not the case.
That's interesting. I don't know if you picked your topic before or after the event of the supply chain incident. Let's just
we don't talk about that anymore. No,
talk about specific companies, but could happen to a number of companies. That, of course, all over the news. Everybody's talking about it. How do we prevent, Russia, whatever? It seems like in some ways that's even going to throw more attention to APTs and take it off. It sounds like you're trying to reset and kind of put things in context. And let's look at the balanced approach of, here's APTs. Now let's talk about malware and ransomware and other kinds of threats and attack, and where this fits in the landscape of what we really need to be concerned about. Is that correct? Is that good?
You absolutely nailed it. And it's funny because this topic is something I've been thinking about for a long time and just haven't had a chance to put together in a presentation. But I chose the topic way before the compromise global supply chain compromise that shall not be named. And then I had a bit of a moment of panic when I was sort of thinking, is my topic still relevant? And it was funny because, that first week that everyone was talking about global supply chain compromise, it was interesting because the week after that is when we started to see a lot of the commodity malware threats like Qbot and Emotet come back. And everyone in the community was still focused on this global supply chain compromise, while all of these other boring threats were creeping back in. And so honestly, after my kind of panic attack of, is my presentation ruined by this? I decided no, because even more than ever, it's very easy for us to get distracted by whatever's in the news. But where I try to push my team and CTI analysts that I talk to, focus on the threats that are important for your organization, that you're seeing, that are likely to target you. And it's a really tough thing. But yeah, I think more than ever, even given global events, really important to think about the fact that APTs are not everything.
Mm-hmm. I think it's in our nature to be interested in the flashy, the shiny object at the moment, but also the bad people also see it as an opportunity. Hey, everybody's distracted on this. Let's go back to the bread and butter things, or things that we know work, or while they're away looking at other things, we'll go hit them hard in other places that we know work and are tried and true, or maybe some new exploits that people aren't talking about, only in certain circles.
Exactly. Adversaries are so opportunistic and they know when we're distracted. And so that's all I could think of is we were seeing a lot of crimeware come in, families like I mentioned, Qbot or Bazaar coming in recent weeks. And a lot of those families that maybe aren't quite as exciting on face value, they ultimately will lead to ransomware. We've seen this. My team's talked about it in blog posts. A lot of others have as well. And so it's a challenge because, when you're looking at one threat, you're ignoring others, right? That there are only so many analysts you have, only so many hours in a day. And you really have to try to focus on the threats that matter most. I talk about some of those in my presentation. Ransomware is one, and what my team calls ransomware precursors. Another huge one that a lot of people don't talk about that I highlight is BEC, business email compromise, which is where, the adversaries email and say, I'm the CEO of Red Canary, transfer $1 million. And of course, I don't want to make my CEO mad. So
sign my document, whatever it is.
Transfer money, wire transfers. And it's fascinating because that's a problem that has many, many times the dollar losses than even ransomware, which is pretty rampant. But a lot of people aren't talking about that. And so, I talk about the challenge of focusing so much on APTs, but then at the end, I have some takeaways, some simple tools you can use like threat modeling, which is a process where you can really try to focus on what are the threats that are most likely to affect my organization. And that can really help organizations focus on the threats that really matter to them. Sometimes it might include APTs, but many organizations I talk to, once they give a careful look at what are you seeing, what are the most common threats, it ends up being things like those ransomware precursors, crimeware, even malicious adware that they focus on more than APTs.
Yeah, it's unless you're running the, national power grid or some government agency or, some national infrastructure. Yeah, the APTs are there. They're important. We don't want to fall victim to it. But I always think of security threat intelligence as kind of the model of water. One of the most damaging things you can have is water damage. Why? Because it just gets in. It finds the easiest way to get in. Doesn't look for the hard ways. It looks for the easy ways. Why put through all that effort? So it just uses gravity to find its way into your house or your basement or whatever. And that's kind of what really security is about.
And that's a great point. I love the water metaphor. This is another kind of myth about APTs that I try to talk through in my presentation. A lot of people think, because advanced is in the term, right, that APTs always use sophisticated techniques. But what my team and many others have found is, again, that's not the case. That if adversaries don't have to burn their, super sophisticated techniques, they're not going to. And so what we've seen is, a broad behavior-based approach to detection, looking for things like encoded PowerShell. So-called APTs use that, but so do a lot of commodity malware threats. And it's interesting, I was previously on the MITRE ATT&CK team, and I've really had the chance in my current role to look at how it's really true that if you look for these same behaviors that adversaries are doing over and over, you have a pretty good chance at catching adversaries, regardless of whether they're motivated by espionage or financial gain or anything else.
Interesting. Now you're doing a talk, but you're also doing an interactive session. How's that going to work? What are you expecting to engage the audience, and how that's going to happen?
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Casey and the team over at RSA have been wonderful with planning. Folks like that don't get enough attention. They work so hard, but they said, hey, what do you want to do for an interactive session? Let's try something different and something new. And I said, let's just open it up. Let's just let people ask questions and let's just see where the conversation takes us. So if anyone's listening, please come, and no one wants to be the first one to ask those questions. So my assumption is for the first 5 or 10 minutes, everyone's going to be shy. And then of course, when there's 2 minutes left, everyone asks the questions and I get all these topics. But I'm really excited to dive into, anyone who had a chance to watch the presentation. What were their reactions? What do they disagree with? Because that helps me kind of solidify my thinking and consider different perspectives. And then I'm excited to really just dive into anything else, on cyber threat intelligence or detection or ransomware, kind of see what's on the audience's mind. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm just going to watch as questions come in and answer them and see how it goes.
Good. Who are the best folks that should be coming to this? Is this tailored to a specific part of our industry, different roles people play, or more general audience? What are your thoughts on who gets the most out of coming?
Yeah, for my talk specifically, my goal is to aim it at a very wide audience. Anyone who works in cybersecurity, information security, I think you could benefit from it because, almost everyone, even, my mom who doesn't do cybersecurity has heard about, state-sponsored compromises. And I think it's really important for all of us as information security professionals to understand how prevalent those operations are, when those threats matter or not, why they're so prevalent that we talk about. So, if you're in cyber threat intelligence, you might get something a little different out of this than, a security engineer, but I think there are takeaways for everyone, and including leaders. This is one in particular that if you're a CISO in a position like that where you task other people, I'd be very curious. I'm going to try to solicit their input because I think a lot of the focus on threats starts from the top. So happy to have anyone attend and join me for the interactive session as well.
Good. Yeah, the folks that set those priorities of where you're going to spend your time, your limited resources. Well, good. Anything else we should know about the session other than you giving it and benefiting from it that way?
No, just be happy to have anyone join on January 27th. And I love this community. I love engaging with folks. So anyone can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at Like the Coins. It's based on my last name, so don't overthink it. But reach out. I love talking with this community about anything threat focused.
Great. Wonderful. Katie Nichols, it's been great talking with you and wish you the best. I know you have a great session and conversation with the participants. So, and as you said, this is not just an audience, it's a community, right? We're all working together in different roles, respective organizations, different kinds of companies, but we share a lot of common interests, and that's how it gets better, by helping each other, not just helping ourselves.
Absolutely. I believe in sharing is caring, right? So thanks so much. Pleasure to be with you today.
You bet. Thanks for joining us.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another episode of TechStrong TV. I had a great time enjoying every single one of these conversations, and I hope you did too. We will have another great lineup for you on Monday's show. And again, as I said at the top of the broadcast, the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit is happening today and tomorrow, January 21 and 22. Please head over to predict2021.com, get registered, and enjoy some of the sessions or all of the sessions. Even if you can't make it during the actual time, we will have it on demand as well. So lots and lots of really great information that's going to be happening during the 2 days of the summit. So please do go check it out. And please do make plans to come back on Monday and join us for another new episode of TechStrong TV. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.